Welcome back. This video will be very interesting. We are going to talk about Elon's compensation plan, what exactly happened there in Delaware and what needs to be done next, also what's at stake. And this video will be very dense because we have to go into some legal theories and we have to look into what exactly happened to have the right prediction of what the scenarios actually are. So let me start with the big picture here. We are going to go through in this video, first of all, what is Elon's role at Tesla and why is he important? Number two, what is Elon's compensation plan? I will make this very quick. What are the legal basics here we are dealing with? What is the court decision? What is the appeals process? What is your vote all about? What are the scenarios and stakes here? And what we can do. And let me start with the big picture on Elon. So the reason we are making so much money with Tesla, and we will probably make much more money, is because Tesla is a company that has a very unique capability of creating overlapping S-curves, right? It starts with electric vehicles, it then goes into full self-driving, and then it goes into humanoid robots. And each of these S-curves opens up a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. So I'm always roughly estimating the EV opportunity can get this share price to $500 or 1.5 trillion market cap if Tesla just keeps executing and owns 20% of world market shares in EVs, which I think is very conservative. But EVs are not everything here. FSD can take this to $15 trillion or $5,000 per share. Why? Because FSD will replace the normal car ownership model and put robot taxis or cybercabs all over the place. And then third, you have an uncapped market opportunity with humanoid robots and the replacement of human labor and the multiplication of the $30 trillion labor market. Now, Tesla is at a pole position right now to initiate these S-curves, these new S-curves, and take the stock price way beyond these $500 that EVs could generate. But why is Tesla able to do that? And the answer is, it's Elon. It is Elon Musk because if you know anything about innovation and anything about any great company that was ever built, it's always the founder who has to drive these new S-curves. Once you remove the founder, you go into General Motors mode and you can ride the current S-curve if you're lucky and get that up. But you can never initiate a new S-curve because you need a leader who actually has a vision and leads this whole thing and drives it and is in sync with the company. And history has shown it's always the founders. Every founder-led company that is big performs, well, not every, but most founder-led companies that get big completely outperform all other companies. So Elon is an absolute must for the future of Tesla that would drive the stock price up that much. And I think we all agree with that. Now, Elon's comp plan, number two, let's very quickly go into that. The court decision actually contained a quick summary of the comp plan. In 2018, shareholders voted on granting Musk a incremental ownership increase of 6% of the company if Elon increases the market cap from 50 billion to 650 billion. So that's roughly a 12x, 1,200% market cap increase in exchange for 6% of the company. So in other words, if I make you $120, are you going to pay me $6? That was a deal. And shareholders said, sure, that sounds a good deal, right? If someone comes to you, is like, give me $100, I give you back $1,200, but I want $60 off that as my payment. Would you take the deal? And there's no risk. If I don't deliver that amount, you don't pay me that amount. Of course, every person in their right mind would say, of course, I'm going to do that. The legal basics of this case are kind of very simple. It's not rocket science, at least not for us. I'm going to go to the court in a minute. But there is a CEO that is employed by a company. There is a board that, proposes compensation for the CEO. And there are the shareholders or the owners of this company who have to approve this kind of stuff. And the real contract here on a look-through basis is between shareholders, owners, and the employees of the company, including the CEO. And so the shareholders decided, you know what, Elon, if you make me $1,200, I'm happy to pay you $60 for it. You make me 1,200%, I pay you 6%. No problem. You 12x the value of my shares, you can keep 6% of that incremental value. Everything simple and everything very clear. But not so much anymore after the Delaware court. The Court of Chancery that is the court that deals with all kinds of corporation issues, came in and said, wait a moment, you might like that as shareholders, and you might like it as Elon, and you might have a contract, and everyone is happy, and Elon delivered the goods and created tremendous amounts of value in exchange as you agreed. You got the money, Elon, but I don't like it. I'm the judge, and I say, screw you people. I'm against it. And so everyone was very shocked when we heard this, and it's like, oh, what's happening? How is this even possible? I was very startled by that and started to read the opinion. And when I read the opinion, it took me literally 3 seconds reading the summary of the opinion written by the judge. I was completely stunned. I literally thought, what's happening? How is this a normal country and a legal system where something like this can be written in a legal opinion? So what she writes, and I will read her summary opinion so you understand what's going on here. And she says, at a high level, the 6% for 600 billion argument has a lot of appeal. Quick commentary, it's not 6% for 600 billion, that wouldn't tell us much. It's 6% for 1,200% generated for shareholders, okay? That's very important. She continues. But that appeal quickly fades when one remembers that Musk owned 21.9% of Tesla when the board approved his compensation plan. I don't get it. Why? What does this have to do with his compensation? This ownership stake gave him every incentive to push Tesla to levels of transformative growth. Musk stood to gain over 10 billion for every 50 billion in market capitalization increase. So here the judge is absolutely wrong. She writes sentences that are inherently illogical and factually wrong without even knowing anything other than reading the sentence. So she's writing, this ownership stake of 21.9% gave him every incentive. She literally writes every incentive to push Tesla to levels of transformative growth because Musk stood to gain 10 billion for every 50 billion in market capitalization increase. Basically, the judge is arguing here that $55 billion in additional payment is not an incentive. It's 0% incentive. Because Elon already had every incentive. These are her words. So she says every incentive, meaning everything else is not an incentive. So she's arguing $50 billion are not an incentive, 0% incentive. I don't think that's correct. And she continues, Musk had no intention of leaving Tesla, and he made that clear at the outset of the process and throughout this litigation. Of course, that's also fundamentally wrong. Of course, why do you think Musk negotiates compensation? Of course, if you wouldn't get paid, you might intend to leave Tesla. So she's implying here if he wouldn't have gotten any kind of payment plan in place, he would have never developed the intention to leaving Tesla. That's also unknowable and probably extremely wrong. So you see, we are starting to read this opinion and every little sentence is completely wrong. Moreover, she continues, the compensation plan was not conditioned on Musk devoting any set amount of time to Tesla because the board never proposed such a term. How is that related to anything? So this judge seems to think compensation for founders and leaders of complicated things, you're getting compensated for sitting in an office like a judge and getting paid by the minute. And if you sit 8 hours, you get paid twice as much as sitting 4 hours. Dear judge, this is not how it works. This is a transformative company. You're not getting paid for sitting somewhere. You're getting paid for delivering stock price increase by being very smart and doing the right thing, not by clocking in and out. So I don't understand how the sentence should even be in this whole opinion. Now we get to my favorite. She continues, swept up by the rhetoric of all upside, or perhaps starry-eyed by Musk's superstar appeal, the board never asked the $55.8 billion question. Was the plan even necessary for Tesla to retain Musk and achieve its goals? Okay, so here we get to something that I will go a little bit deeper in a second. She's making all these insinuations and offensive insinuations against the board that she has no proof for and no basis to even make these accusations. She implies that the board was swept up by the rhetoric. Did the board say they were swept up? No, lacks any kind of basis. Swept up by the rhetoric of all upside. It's not rhetoric, by the way. It is all upside. The deal literally is all upside and no downside. It is not rhetoric, it's the deal, the contract terms. Or perhaps starry-eyed by Musk's superstar appeal. What kind of legal opinion is this? These are like assumptions, opinions, and biases all over the place. What do you mean superstar? What does that mean? What is the legal definition of a superstar, and how does this tie into any of these things? What about starry-eyed? So you're implying that the board looked at him as a star and a superstar and therefore couldn't make up their minds? What kind of insinuations are these without any kind of basis? This is ridiculous. And then in the end, she says, the board never asked the $55.8 billion question, was the plan necessary for Tesla to retain Musk and achieve its goals? Okay, Judge. So you're saying literally that the board never asked the question if a $55 billion plan is necessary to retain Musk and achieve the goals of Tesla. On what basis are you making the claim that the board never asked the central question of this compensation plan? On what basis does the judge say all these board members of Tesla never asked if Tesla has to pay $55.8 billion to Musk in order to retain him and achieve Tesla's goals? That's like the most outrageous statement I've ever read in any legal opinion by a judge. To claim that the board did not ask the central question of this whole thing. Of course, the board asked the question, do we have to sign off this compensation plan in order for Musk to stay here and achieve the goals of Tesla? Of course, they asked the question. So why are you writing in your opinion they never asked that question? That's insane. To write this is literally twisted. So I was absolutely shocked when I read this opinion. But the good news is, this opinion is so full of extreme biases and falsehoods that I think it prepares this opinion to be appealed. So let's start to, it's very important that we understand, is this going to hold up or is it not going to hold up? On the merits, before we go into the legal topics, on the merits, even without looking at any kind of law, right, we need to make a judgment by the merits. On the merits, is this plan fair? Is it fair to say that an entrepreneur and a leader of a complex company gets 6% if he increases the value for the owners of this company by 1,200%? As I explained, if you give me $100 and I turn it into $1,200, is it fair of me to receive 60 of your dollars that I generated? I mean, I would say, of course. So that's the basic merits. And if it wouldn't be legal to do that, we would have a big problem. And we would have to, we would need to actually change the laws to make this okay. Because if that's not okay, say goodbye to free market innovation. If it's not okay to pay an entrepreneur who does all the freaking work and puts his genius into this thing, if it's not okay to pay him 6% in return of generating 1,200% of returns, something is fundamentally wrong. So besides the merits, let's go into quickly the legal problems here, because fortunately, we don't have to reinvent the legal system to have legal problems here with that. There are two things in the Constitution that I think that are very helpful here. The 14th Amendment and the 5th Amendment. The 5th Amendment guarantees due process to everyone that you want to take property away, for example, which is exactly what happened here. So the judge decided, let's take all that stuff away from Elon after the contract is agreed upon by everyone and after 5 or 6 years of hard work. Let's take just $55 billion away because he doesn't need it. Well, you can't do that in the United States. You can't just remove people's property because you don't like it. There's something called due process. And part of that is the person must have an opportunity to be heard and present and present their case before an impartial decision maker. And the judge already mentioned a bunch of things in her opinion that even in the short summary make clear that she is probably not impartial. Fair procedures, the process must be conducted in a fair and unbiased manner. And I think there is, this thing is littered with evidence that there is bias. But my favorite is the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. And under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, disparate treatment of similar cases raise constitutional concerns. If the court would decide, well, you can't do this, you can't get paid 6% if you create 1,200% of value, even if everyone agrees it's illegal. Well, but if you say that, you can't just say it to Elon because you don't like him. You have to say it to everyone. Can't just apply to Elon. And if you don't, it's something called judicial inconsistency. Let me just talk a little bit about judicial inconsistency here. Elon generates 1,200%, gets 6%. Okay. By saying this is not okay, you're putting a bar, a threshold in and say, like, whoever in the United States gets paid 6% for generating 1,200% of value to the owners they agreed this with on, whoever gets that or more has to give it back. That's exactly what this ruling says. The judge says, Kathleen McCormick, the chancellor of the Court of Chancery in Delaware, says, at least implies it based on, judicial consistency and the 14th Amendment, everyone in America who makes 6% in exchange of generating the contractual partners 1,200%. And by implication, everyone who makes even more than that has to give back that compensation immediately. Okay. There are two categories of people who this applies to, and more probably, but these two. Number one, every single private equity manager, private equity fund manager, every hedge fund manager, every venture capital GP makes 20% carry or incentive allocation. So all of these guys who make 20% of what they make, right, have to give the money back now, according to Judge McCormick, and who are incorporated in Delaware. So good luck with that. So everyone in the country who manages a fund is now up for grabs. Because you can go to every fund manager and say, you know what, you had an agreement with your investors and you made the money and you got your 20%. You have to now give it back because Judge McCormick doesn't like it. She thinks you're too rich and it's completely inappropriate. And believe me, Elon got 55 billion. There are tons of people over 5 years who got over $1 billion, right? Who also got a lot of money. So they all have to give it back now because they get much more than Elon. Elon gets 6% for 1,200%. And they get, 20% of all gains. So that's the equivalent of Elon not getting 6%, but getting, 24%. And the other category of people who now has to give back all of their compensation are entrepreneurs all over the place. Every tech entrepreneur, everyone who has a compensation plan that, for example, gives them 5% of the company if they increase the value by 1,000% is out, right? They have to give back all their shares now. Everyone who makes, has an option incentive plan to make 5% of the company if they fivefold the company's value, right? If I have a $100 million company and I'm, as the founder, get paid 5% of the company if I increase this to 500 million because I'm making my investors rich. No, Judge McCormick says, not so fast. You give it all back and your investors get screwed. She also says, if you own 21% of a company, that is more than enough to be incentivized. Okay, that's very interesting. So you're saying if a founder owns, let's say, 40% of a company, Judge McCormick can now come in and say, you know what? You got no compensation, no salary, but you own 40% of your company. That's inappropriate because in my previous ruling, I said Elon is completely more than enough incentivized with 21% of the company. You have 40%. You know what? You have to now give up 20% of your company because I don't like you. I don't like rich people. I think these rich people have too much money. Sure, you put in all your risk and your life into the company, but 40%, you clearly don't need it. I said Elon's 21% ownership is more than enough to incentivize everyone completely. So everyone who owns more than 21%, we should take away their equity. We, the court. Because why not? You have to understand my argument here, why this is a 14th Amendment argument. It's not about if, Kathleen McCormick is wrong on the merits of making these judgments, right? If you're a devout socialist, for example, you can hold the conviction that no one should make this much money, regardless of what you do. I personally think that's complete madness and proven to lead to all kinds of problems. But you can't objectively argue that if Judge McCormick thinks that no one should be rich like that, sure, she can think that. But what she cannot do is think that about Elon and not think that about everyone else. This is judicial inconsistency, and that has nothing to do with your political convictions. It has to do with being consistent. If you take away Elon's comp package, you have to take away everyone's comp package who is as good or better than Elon's in percentage terms, because nothing else makes actually sense. Good luck with that, and good luck showing that you're actually doing that. And if you don't, you have judicial inconsistency. Number 2, also 14th Amendment and 5th Amendment, judicial bias. A judge making assumptions about facts not in evidence, showing favoritism towards one party, or having a personal interest in the outcome. That's judicial bias. That's not okay. That will lead to an overruling of that ruling. Now, does the judge have a bias here? Does the judge make assumptions about facts that are not based on evidence and showing favoritism or the opposite of that towards any one party? Well, I would argue if you say about someone, well, they got swept up by the rhetoric of all upside, even though that's facts of all upsides, or perhaps, she literally says perhaps, she literally speculates about the character and decision-making process of the board for a $50 billion pay package. Very serious topic. She just speculates, in her opinion, perhaps they were starry-eyed by Musk's superstar appeal that I really don't like. I don't like these superstars. The board never asked the question if Elon should get that package and if that was actually necessary. Okay, you think the board never asked this question. So judicial bias, number 2. I will stop here giving you my legal opinion about this, but all of that for me shows that if this ever gets to any kind of Supreme Court, it will go to the Supreme Court in Delaware, and after that, if they would not do anything, it goes probably to the Supreme Court, if we make sure that actually happens. It's very hard to see for me that this is not getting thrown out, because it's a heavy, extreme violation of the 14th and probably also the 5th Amendment. So now the appeals process, how does it look like? Because this thing will, of course, get appealed. The first step is it goes to the Delaware Supreme Court. And we will see. I looked at the Supreme Court. They look like reasonable people. Let's see what happens. And these are more judges, and now they have to actually form an opinion. Of course, the Delaware Supreme Court doesn't work on the US Constitution. They have their own, legal framework that I didn't look into, so I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen there, but common sense should kick in at some point. Now, that's the appeals process before anything happens here. Let's get to the vote. So now you know the basics of this case. The vote is very interesting. Tesla now puts a vote to the shareholders that's coming up June 13th, where we have, the shareholder meeting. And the vote is twofold, right? The first vote is for should Elon get the compensation? And that requires a simple majority of votes casted, right? So if, half of the shareholders vote and 30% vote for it, Elon gets approved again by the shareholders to get this compensation. The second vote is a vote to move the headquarters of Tesla to Texas. Now, why? Because, of course, Elon freaked out. The whole board freaked out on this decision. I would have freaked out too, of course, because it's like pulling the rug of legal frameworks. Everything that makes a civilization is just getting pulled. It's like, oh, screw it, property rights, 14th, like we don't care. We just take away your money. And we potentially chase away the greatest entrepreneur of probably all time. So you shareholders are screwed. Tesla is screwed. They say goodbye to FSD. Who needs a few $1 trillion? And so they said, let's move the company out of this crazy state. And this vote for Texas is more difficult because you don't need a simple majority of votes casted. You need actually a majority of all shareholders, of all shares. So if only 10% vote, you're already screwed. You need basically to have more than 50% actually cast the vote and vote yes. So Texas is not easy to achieve. Why is it a good move? Of course, Texas would provide probably much more safety around the basic principles of US law. It seems just politically less likely that Texas would allow judges like that to sit in such important decision-making positions. And Texas is probably going to be much more a defender for the Constitution and property rights and free markets. Now, what are the scenarios and stakes? Let's go into that. The scenario and stakes here, it's very simple, the scenarios. We have, in the first scenario, a compensation vote no and a taxes vote no. I would say this outcome has a probability of less than 10%. I don't bet on this. I think it's very unlikely because the compensation vote is a no-brainer for anyone who's a shareholder and pays any kind of attention. So the vote is like, oh, should we screw over and betray Elon after we made a promise and a deal with Elon? So, and then this activist judge comes in and says, oh, screw all that stuff. Are we now going back and say, oh yeah, the judge says, screw you, Elon. We also want to completely screw you because we think you're an idiot. Okay, if you're a shareholder of Tesla, you probably don't want that because you want to make more money in the future. There is a big class of shareholders, unfortunately, that doesn't care. These are the index funds, and they don't care. Not just that they don't care, they actually ask terrible people to give them their opinion and just execute on their opinion. But the majority of shareholders are real shareholders that actually pay attention. So I don't think this is very likely. If it happens, I think it's not great. But even then, not all is lost. It goes still to the Supreme Court. And from there, if they say this is nothing good, I think it just goes to the Supreme Court of the United States for the reasons I mentioned. So I don't think this chapter is over. And even if everyone votes no, I don't think Elon just leaves. I think this will be a legal battle that will be ongoing, that we have a certain good chance of actually winning in the end. That's why I'm less nervous. But it would send a very disturbing signal if the shareholders vote no on the comp. Now, the scenario number 2, the most likely, by far most likely, is that the shareholders vote yes on compensation and we fail to get a 50% plus taxes vote for the mechanics reasons I mentioned. That's the most likely outcome. It's not ideal, and it's actually very similar to the first outcome in legal terms, because you still have to go to the appeals process, still need to win this eventually to actually overturn this whole thing and get Elon the vote. These activist guys on the other side, they already prepare to strike down the repeated yes vote, because listen about this here. This is the craziest thing. They are saying if the shareholders vote yes again, and even if the board would be completely unbiased and whatever now, and would force the court to admit that, they would still strike it down, because now they are saying, well, Elon already did all the work. So what is this for? It's a gift. And for a gift, you need a yes vote from every single shareholder or something, because now it's not compensation anymore, because compensation you don't need for the past. That's literally the thinking of these people. The third outcome is the comp vote is yes, and the taxes vote is yes. Well, then all problems are solved. Tesla moves to Texas, has a safe legal environment, and probably this thing gets released. Of course, there are some dummies out there, so-called legal experts, who say, well, the law in Texas is very similar to Delaware. Therefore, Texas courts would decide like Delaware. Like, newsflash, this court decision is not based on the law. It's based on activist judges. The law doesn't allow any of these things. So it doesn't matter if Texas has the same law. Delaware has pretty good laws. It just has a problem with its courts right now. Of course, the stakes for Delaware are actually also very high. Last comment on this. Because people are not dumb. What do you think all hedge fund managers, all private equity managers, all venture capitalists, plus every entrepreneur in the country is looking at here? There's like, wait a moment. If I incorporate in Delaware, some crazy activist can come in and take all my shares, basically, at any time, regardless what my investors say and my shareholders. They can just move in and take it away. If I own more than 20% of my company, they can take that. If I get a compensation plan that is basically over 6% for a 1,200% generated, they can take it away from me now. Oh, I wonder how many people incorporate in Delaware anymore. So for Delaware, a lot is at stake. The more these logics I'm explaining in this video actually trickle through to the community of value creators, they're going to say, are you kidding me? This is not just about screwing Elon over. This is about undermining the entire principle of free market innovation. With this ruling, now the judge not only has the discretion to take all your shares away and all your compensation as any kind of normal entrepreneur, she has to do it, because otherwise it's a violation of the 14th Amendment. They have to go all out and take all that money away from everyone in America who created a lot of value. There is no, or this thing gets struck down. So there's a problem here for Delaware. Now, what can you do? So number one, of course, vote yes on both, on taxes and on paying Elon what he deserves, what we agreed on as shareholders. And number two, tell everyone to vote yes on both. So number one, vote. And if your broker doesn't allow it, then make sure you're switching brokers or tell the broker you want to vote. But second, and I think that's a real appeal I want to do here to the Tesla community and to anyone who is an entrepreneur, anyone who believes that we should create value in this country. We have to speak up on this. We have to speak up. And by the way, I'm not personally criticizing Kathleen McCormick. I think she has her political convictions and she's, acting on them. And maybe she believes it's the right thing to do, to take the money from the rich people. And I'm not here to criticize her personal opinions. I'm here to criticize the legal procedures and the inconsistencies, the judicial inconsistencies here that are crazy. We need to make this a thing and tell people, if we don't stop this, if we allow things like that to happen, we are not in a developed country anymore. We are undermining the very foundations of free market innovation. Not just any principles, but the core principles of property rights, the core principles of free market innovation get targeted here with this decision. And this is not just about screwing over Elon. It's about screwing over every shareholder, every investor, and every entrepreneur who engages in disruptive innovation in this country. We are all now on the cut chopping block. Everyone. So that's, I think, the big picture here. Vote, of course, yes, but also start pushing back and spreading awareness of what's actually happening here and spreading awareness that this has to stop, that this has to get overruled in the appeals process. And Delaware should be very aware that we are aware of what's happening here, that everyone who's an innovator is aware of this, anyone who's a shareholder of any innovative company. And I know many of you don't like politics. We don't want to go into that. I remember in one video where I just mentioned Trump and Biden, all the comments freaked out. I'm sorry. But when you read history books on Europe and on other countries, you cannot hide from politics. Politics is dirty and is always a little evil. But if you hide from it, it will come to you and your home, and it will take back, as we see here, your property. It will prevent you from becoming prosperous and free. These people will come after you. So we cannot hide. We have to stand up and defend the principles this civilization was built on. Truth, justice, freedom. This opinion is littered with untruths. It represents injustice of enormous and dangerous proportions. And of course, it attacks at its core freedom. It says, if you have a deal with that person, you're both very happy, everyone makes money, I make much more than Elon on Elon's performance in percentage terms. Someone can come in and take this freedom away from Elon and from me as a shareholder. That is not okay. That is a violation of central principles. This entire thing here we are living in was built on. We need to hold them accountable and fix this. Otherwise, we will lose all three things: truth, justice, and freedom. So don't just be a shareholder of Tesla here. Be someone who defends the basic principles. Do not allow these people to interfere with us like this. So I hope that was helpful. My prediction is, the vote will be yes. Texas will not go through, even though I hope it will. My prediction on the share price of this whole thing is Elon is not going to leave Tesla. He will keep fighting, and there is lots of legal grounds in the Delaware Supreme Court to win. If we would lose, the next step is the US Supreme Court. If we lose in the US Supreme Court, we will have a much bigger problem here, a much bigger problem than just losing a ton of money on Tesla shares. So I don't think this is going to happen. I still have some faith left. So I think it's very important that we go out, that we vote yes, yes, that we make clear to everyone what's happening here and how bad this is. But as a shareholder, I think we will win. And I do not think this is a vote that just happens on June 13th and then some terrible thing happens and Elon leaves. I think Elon's decisions will also be driven by us, the community. We need to stand behind him, and we need to make sure that Elon also understands this is a political problem, and we will help him solve this political problem together with everyone else in this country who believes in truth, justice, and freedom. And we will not lose this fight. So I wouldn't be too concerned about the shares if we do these things. Okay, I hope this was helpful. See you next time.